All right, I want to start off this one by saying, yes, I know I'm late. Life happens, things happen. But we're here today to talk about Shaky Knees 2026. I got Deftones today. I didn't have any artists from this year. At least I don't think, anyway. So we're going back to last year. But this is actually a festival I haven't been to before. This is on the same weekend as Louder Than Life. It's not a 4-day festival. It's only 3 days. But it kind of posits as the alternative. That's kind of weird to say. But this is more of like your indie and alternative stuff, whereas your Louder Than Life's more metal, hard rock type, new metal, even some stuff. But there is some crossover here. There's actually quite a few bands that are playing on both, which I don't believe I've seen in the past, at least this level of crossover. Just already off the top, I think Taking Back Sunday, Pierce the Veil, The Prodigy, Danny Elfman. I think that's it. But maybe Knock Loose, we don't 100% know if they're playing in Louder Than Life yet. That is heavily rumored. But I think Coheed is also at both as well. But this is quite a level of overlap. But we're going to talk about each individual day. And then I just want to kind of stack this up versus previous years. Now, one thing that I do like about this festival in particular is that they continue to kind of get new lineups every year, right? They don't have very many repeat artists. I believe the Strokes are a repeat headliner from earlier this decade, but I'm willing to give them a little bit of an exception for the Strokes because they're a band that doesn't play a whole lot of shows anyway. Typically, they only play festivals. They did tour opening for Red Hot like earlier this decade. I think that was already like 2023 at this point, 2022. It was definitely a few years ago. I don't remember the exact year. But that was like the only time I can really remember the Strokes touring in modern memory. I know for the most part they really are only playing festivals these days or like one-off shows. Like I think they are playing like a headline show in San Francisco, but it's only because Coachella is like the weekend after that. So that's your Friday headliner. And they got Turnstile, Fontaines DC, and Geese. So Geese I know is a band that's really kind of raised their profile. I personally haven't gotten into them a lot, but I think that they are like a perfect like number 2, although they're a little bit further down the lineup, obviously. Now, the rest of this lineup I think is actually pretty solid for Friday. Now, we'll like take a look. I'm going to talk a lot about last year because, well, we can just kind of start this by saying last year's lineup, if we pull it up right now, was like through and through in the running for one of the best festival lineups I can remember. Like I know I said that Louder Than Life the other day had like the best festival lineup ever, and it's definitely a lot stronger than this, in my opinion. But this was really good, deep throughout, had a lot of stuff all day. For those who don't know, Shaky Knees 2 also does their, I have it somewhere, yeah, their schedule is a little bit different. So if you take a look, we'll take a look at a day that's a little bit more of a packed schedule. So unlike Saturday, I can't zoom in for some reason. So kind of have to bear with me, maybe zoom in on your screen. But as you'll notice, the end band does play an hour and a half set, which is fairly typical for a music festival like this. You know, an hour and a half, depending on the band, or 2 hours. But this, I actually think I think this schedule got slightly readjusted because I do believe My Chem started at 9:15. I didn't go to this, but I did have a friend who did. And I was kind of keeping track of it, and I was trying to plan on going at one point. But as you'll notice, if you kind of look around, this is the main stage, this Peachtree stage over here on the left. And My Chem plays an hour and a half. Cage the Elephant plays for an hour, right? TV on the Radio plays at 5:30. They play for an hour as well. And if you'll notice, all of your side stages, too, they all have hour-long closing sets. Their last 3 sets on stage 2, 3 are all an hour, last 2 on your 4th stage, and then 45-minute sets for basically everybody throughout the day. The only one that had a shortened set was Songs for Kids, which I believe is like a charity. But everybody gets extended exposure, which I really like. I think that's actually pretty cool. I think that's really nice. So we can take a look again here. So you can expect like, okay, well, Strokes are going to play for an hour and a half, but you're going to get an hour set from your next 3 headliners at least, and then most of these guys probably as well. So that's really cool. That's something that does make it a little bit more unique in the modern festival landscape. You don't have artists who are playing for only like 40 minutes, 30 minutes throughout the day. Now, there's pluses and minuses to that. You notice this is a lot smaller of a lineup, except for Saturday. Saturday is huge, and I'm interested to see how that factors in, because you're probably not going to get as much of your extended sets, but I could also see them adding an extra stage or something like that, because if you take a look, going back real quick, on Friday, the door opens super late, right, for the first day. It's also worth noting, too, this festival's in Atlanta, but it's in, like, downtown Atlanta. This is not, like, in a typical festival grounds, like Where they have Rockville, right? That's outside of the city. Where they have Aftershock, that's outside of the city. I think Sonic Temple's in Columbus, but like I'm just comparing it to ones that I already know about. Like I know Riot Fest is kind of in down. Like this is in a downtown area, right? So maybe on Friday they open a little bit later because they're like, okay, we know a lot of people aren't going to show up early. So the Friday lineup's a little bit truncated, but it's also like super strong throughout. Now I'm not familiar with Ben Howard, but I'm familiar with most of the rest of these artists, at least on the top rows, the top three. And I think that they're all going to be pretty solid. I think if you get a good hour out of most of these guys, maybe Hot Mulligan might only play like 45 minutes. Cartel was one that I actually didn't notice the first time. They're interesting. They're like kind of emo, one-hit wondery in that range. They only got a couple songs like that I know, but their first album's really good. That's what I remember about them. So that's kind of cool. Like I said, Turnstile, Fontaines DC, Geese, all pretty. Turnstile probably started raising in profile a couple years ago, but these other two have been like really on the rise in the last year, so it's really cool to see. Danny Elfman, like I talked about in the video for Louder Than Life, is a very unique experience. You're going to get a lot of like more orchestral and just nostalgia trip stuff, so that's super cool. Hot Mulligan is a band that I haven't listened to a whole lot of, but I do like what I hear them, and I know that they're kind of like a pretty highly regarded in the emo scene. When I say emo, it's more of a generalization. Snow Strippers I've known about for a couple years, and they kind of had that one song pop off, but they're just really solid, really reliable group. So I haven't like had a chance to check out much of their live footage, but that'll be cool. Like I said, I don't really know Ben Howard. And then on the bottom, you got Alice, Phoebe Lou, Goldford, and Cartel, who I talked about earlier. So I think the first day is actually pretty solid, especially considering that it's a shorter lineup. I think you still get a pretty decent value throughout. So I would be pretty content with that as the first day. All right, I zoomed in a little bit, so it should be a little bit easier to see what we got going on Saturday. Saturday, to me, is kind of where this festival is kind of made, right? This is your best day. This Deepest Day, I think, has a lot of bands all throughout the lineup. I'm not, to be honest, as familiar with a lot of the bands kind of lower, but I think this is a good variety day. I think this is a good kind of high-end entertainment day. You got a good headliner, I think, a pretty like high-profile headliner. I believe this day actually already sold out GA Plus or VIP. I think VIP already sold out for Saturday. 21 Pilots fans are built different, but they're the headliner for that night. You obviously got they have a very rabid fan base. It's similar to like My Chemical Romance last year. You got people who will go just to see 21 Pilots, so they're a big draw, obviously. But I think Pierce the Veil is a really good counterpoint because they serve a little bit different of an audience, in my opinion. Though I do think that they'll actually be like the band that goes on before 21 Pilots, because I think the Prodigy, who is your third band listed here, third artist listed here, they're going to be on the other side closing out that number 2 stage, because just kind of, without maybe getting in the weeds a little bit too much, like it's easier to kind of set up for a band like the Prodigy because a lot of the stuff is electronic, they're playing off computers. Now they do play live too, but you just have to do things a little bit different in terms of like sound rigging and stuff like that. So that's why I was kind of interested in their placement on the Louder Than Life lineup. But I think for like practicality's sake, it makes more sense to have the Prodigy kind of close stage 2, since it's the same length as like a number 2 on stage 1 type lineup, time slot, excuse me. And then you got Pavement. Now Pavement doesn't play a lot of shows anymore. They're I had them confused, I think, with Pulp the other day when I was looking at it, but they are, I think, like just getting into touring again recently. They have had their profile raised by this random B-side that got super popular on TikTok, and Spotify playlisted it. It's very interesting to see as somebody who's been listening to them for like a decade and a half, and none of my friends would have ever known who they were in high school. Not that I'm a huge fan or anything, but they were like, I like their first 2 or 3 albums a lot, and at least listen to them pretty frequently. And it's just interesting to see them kind of have this second life, kind of breathed in. But overall, I think this is a really good, like I talked about, Friday's just solid, like throughout. You got a lot of up and coming groups. This is like more established and bringing a variety to it. Like I said, the Prodigy don't play a lot of US shows. Pavement doesn't play a whole lot, and they're like a more less frequently touring band, I should say. So you get some draws, and then obviously Pierce the Veil is huge. They just sold out an amphitheater tour last year, twice essentially. Their first leg sold out, second leg I believe pretty much fully sold out. They are taking a step back this year as far as their touring plans. Now they have a couple headline shows in Hawaii that they're doing, I believe next month, April. So a month from now, as of recording this video, you got March and then April, because it's almost the end of February. So they have those 2 headline shows in Hawaii, and then they have the Homecoming show in San Diego that has already sold out as well. But other than that, I believe they're just festival appearances, and they're supporting a couple of openers. I believe they're opening for My Chemical Romance and Guns N' Roses for 2 or 3 shows. And you'll probably see them pop up on a couple more of these festivals as the year goes on. So, like, they're already playing Louder as well. So they've already said they're not going to play any headlining shows on mainland. So you might see them pop up more throughout the year. But this is going to be one of your only chances to actually see them all throughout the year. As of now, I think there's only like 6 shows scheduled. So you're getting a lot of like rarity. And then 21 Pilots hasn't announced touring plans this year. They just did a massive tour last year and the year before, I believe, as well. It was either the year before or the summer before. But they've been touring for their last 2 albums, like essentially nonstop. So they're another group that I don't expect to see a whole lot of live, but we don't really know a lot of their plans right now. So again, as far as the value of like, you're getting a lot of groups that don't necessarily play a lot of shows and they're kind of attractions on their own. I think this is a really, really good lineup. I actually like this a lot. Next row, you got Jimmy Eat World, who are touring behind the anniversary of Bleed American. I believe 25 years. They're doing some headline shows. They're doing some festival appearances, but it's really like a celebratory anniversary tour. So I would expect them to play maybe a more variety set, like a lot of more hits, but I could see them breaking out a couple of deep cuts, like maybe like Your House or The Authority song on some of these shows. Down the line as well. Their set list, I saw them open for Fall Out Boy. I've seen them at When We Were Young. It's still Bleed American heavy anyway. You're going to get your main big, like 2 songs, obviously. You got the middle, you got Sweetness, but then you get like a praise chorus. Probably play Hear You Me also as part of their normal set. I think they play that every time I've heard them, or every time I've seen them anyway. Blood Orange. I didn't know Blood Orange was still around, to be honest. That's not a name I've heard in a long time, so that's kind of cool. Peach Pit, not a group artist I'm familiar with. I don't know anything about them, to be honest. And Taking Back Sunday. Taking Back Sunday, I talked about in Louder Than Life. Great band, really important band for me personally. Band I used to listen to a ton in high school. The first album, very influential on me and like how I kind of view that genre of music. I really like the second album. It's kind of grown on me over the years, I should say. Third album is like a kind of a stone cold like top, not Mount Rushmore, because their first album is great too. Their third album is great in a very different way. So like Tell All Your Friends is more emo pop punk, like on the I hate to say this, but not on the whiny, like more emotional side. And then Taking Back Sunday's third album, Louder Now, is more on like the alt radio friendly, cleaner, kind of flashier side of things, but is great in its own way. So it's 2 very unique, very different albums that I think both are really, really good. But that being said, their reputation is one of the absolute worst live bands out there. They have had many clips where their frontman is just completely slurring through words, forgetting entire parts of the song, just stops singing at one point. I've had a mixed experience with them. I saw them at When We Were Young, RIP 2022, and they were good. They were really good for the first half of their set, and then it fell off the rails. Like, second half was really, really bad. I saw them again 2 years later, I think, at Rockville, and their set was horrible. Sound was really bad. He wasn't trying at all. It was just really disappointing. But they toured last year with Coheed and Cambria, and they brought back one of their former vocalists / guitarists who had left the band, and he was touring with them just for this tour. And I gotta be honest, they sounded really good. They were actually, I think, better than Coheed and Cambria at that specific show. It might not have been representative of the whole tour. I can only go off of my experience. So they might be back. I don't know if they're touring with that singer, because he was a big part of what made this set, I think, a lot better, because he was... I don't want to get too much into this. Like, I've already talked about Taking Back Sunday for way too long, but they had a singer, / guitarist. He left after the first album. They replaced him with a different one for albums 2 and 3. That was like all their big radio hits. So like Make Damn Sure and What's It Feel Like to Be a Ghost and Liar, all the like their songs from that era that were really popular. So having that singer back made those songs work a little bit better live, I think. You lost a little bit of kind of some of the magic from the first one, but anyway. Mixed experience. I don't know what to expect. Maybe they've recovered. Maybe they haven't. Maybe I just got lucky. I've heard of a couple of groups down here. I'll read them off real quick, but I don't really have any thoughts on a lot of this supporting acts. This is kind of my nitpick with this, and we'll talk about where this stacks up versus previous year's lineups. I'll just come out flat and say I talked about 2025 already. Go to lineup. One of my favorite festival lineups ever, I think. I'm really sad that I was not able to make that happen last year. This does not in any way, despite how good I think all the headline choices are, stack up to that in any way. It's not comparable. But I think it does stack up a little bit better toward years before that. I think 2025 was just like a one-off kind of perfect storm type situation where they were able to get all this talent in one spot and just at perfect times in all their careers, and it lined up perfect, right? This is a little bit more like realistic of what you can kind of expect. Now, minus the Bear and Wolf Alice are bands I've listened to in the past. I think they're pretty good, but not like anything I'm like next necessarily recommend or say that I think is like, okay, this is really, really good. But after that, you got the Rapture, Congress the band, Psychedelic Porn Crumpets, please don't be monetizing me, Jordy Greep, Elio May, Villanelle, Cruz Beckham, Rehash, Rum Jungle, the Inspector Cluzo, which I think is supposed to be like the dude from the Pink Panther. I don't know. Hotel Fiction, Sophie's Body, and Songs for Kids. Now, tying back briefly into what I was talking about with the way the schedule works, I think the idea behind this is actually they're going to have a lot longer, more long sets. I think every artist up here is going to have a long set, right? Like they're all going to play an hour, except for 21 Pilots going to get an hour and a half. I think the Prodigy could potentially get more of the time too, depending. But I think that they're going to go for a lot shorter sets earlier in the day. So maybe like minus the Bear and Wolf Alice might play for like 45 minutes. But I think a lot of these groups you could see maybe playing only like 30-minute sets. It's potentially just something to watch out for. Like I said, we won't know until we have set times or anything like that. But that would just be my theory based on the amount of groups that are here on this day versus like the net. There's a whole extra line on Saturday versus Sunday. So that's just kind of my initial thought. And speaking of which, we'll talk about Sunday now. Let's see if I can line this up a little bit better. There we go. So Sunday, we got Gorillaz headlining, and they're honestly a group that I've never seen headline a festival, so I'm very interested to see kind of what they bring. Now, they might have done so in the very recent past, and I just don't remember, but I've actually never seen Gorillaz. I don't know what the live experience is like. It's very weird to me, or like very unique and interesting to me to kind of contemplate what they would sound like live, because a lot of it is just going to be reproducing music with like vocals played back. So, I mean, I'm sure they played live for 20 plus years at this point, so it's probably good, but like it's just interesting, right? And I'm not like a huge Gorillaz head. I know a lot of people, there's actually a lot of people in my life who are really like into Gorillaz, like the whole like immersive experience and stuff like that. But from a like, again, we're talking about like a uniqueness standpoint, you kind of hit it on all 3 days, right? You got the Strokes on day one. They don't play a lot of shows. They're a band that people can legit travel for. I mean, I would, honestly. Like, I would consider it at the very least, depending on my Louder Than Life plans, because I'm trying to try and go to that for sure. But Gorillaz is the same type of thing. And then 21 Pilots obviously is a very rabid fan base. But let's say you're already going for another day, right? And you're like, okay, what do I got? There's two very unique experiences here. You got the Prodigy and Pavement. So, same thing with Gorillaz. They don't play a lot of shows anymore. Or at least not recently. They have a new album coming out, so it's potentially like they could tour behind it. But like they don't play a lot of shows. They don't play a lot of festivals, especially. LCD Sound System is another group that does not play a lot of shows. They probably play like 10, 15 shows a year the last few years. They're doing like this weird residency thing right now. Now they're playing, I think, Okeechobee, and there's one other festival I think that they're playing also this year that I know of anyway. But they don't play a lot of shows. They're going to get a good hour. Their songs are a little long. So I'm a big LCD Sound System fan, right? I've been listening to LCD Sound Systems like 2009, 2010, and like for obviously I know it's after their kind of main run was over, but I wasn't gonna be listening to them in 2002 when I was like 4 years old. So I've been really into this group for a long time. They're another band that informed me a lot musically and kind of like shaped my taste as far as the indie genre and indie side of things, right? But their songs are really long, and I don't know how entertaining a festival set would necessarily be. They're a group that I think would be more compelling to see on like a tour stop, where you can kind of get more immersed in like a different, intimate, more type of setting. But I do think that they can put together a strong festival set out of some of their stuff. Like if they play like, let's say like they have bangers, right? You know, they can make it work. But it'll be interesting to see. I want to see if they actually get any like their Okeechobee footage like uploaded, so I can check that out. The most two random bands or two random artists I'm going to talk about next on this entire lineup. Wu-Tang Clan, complete outlier. Kind of the same spirit though as the Prodigy in a way, if you really think about it. Like, not that they don't tour as much, because actually I think they've been on the road like 2 or 3 different times in this decade so far. I know they played a few shows near me that I've been like advertised to, right? Like they played a couple pool parties, they played arenas, they played like a mid-sized venue, right? Like a 10K cap, they played a 20K cap in the last few years. So they're kind of like around. They're still, you know, have a legacy sheen to them, right? So they're a little bit of a draw in that sense. They're a little bit of an outlier in the fact that I think they're the only hip-hop act that's here that I directly know of anyway. Now, Snow Strippers, EDM, Danny Elfman is obviously like Danny Elfman, like he'll do his Danny Elfman stuff. The Prodigy, EDM, right? But for the most part, and Blood Orange is like more R&B. Wu-Tang Clan is rap. So you kind of got a little bit of representation for everything in that specific sense. So that's cool. I mean, it's nice to have a hip hop artist there, and you could certainly do a lot worse. But it's just a little odd, right? It catches your eye, but I think that's part of the point. Now, the other outlier on the other end is Knocked Loose, which, as far as I know, like I said, there's quite a few bands I'm not familiar with on this list, but they are the only like hardcore screamo / like heavy metal band that's gonna be here. That has like breakdown type music, right? Where they're gonna have like crazy mosh pits and stuff like that. Pierce the Veil is probably the second heaviest, and then to be honest with you, after that might be the Prodigy. Like that's as far as bands that I immediately recognized. That's like my heaviness rankings. So Turnstile, I didn't think about Turnstile is like not heavy though. Like they're more like punk heavy. So it's very very weird to see them like Knocked Loose is such a outlier here again. But this is like kind of the idea behind like this is the more alt, right? Kind of more alt and indie type of festival versus like a Louder Than Life. You got a lot of variety of different types of rock and other genres being represented here as well. Different alternative music, I would say. Like Wu-Tang Clan's like alt rap, right? Blood Orange is alt R&B. Snow Strippers is kind of alt EDM in a lot of ways. So they're like a hyperpop / EDM type thing. Continuing on with like this row is definitely more, other than Knocked Loose, more like back into like the alt rock leaning, right? You got Modest Mouse, like alt rock legends, like indie rock legends. They are still around, still kicking it, kind of respectable. I'm not a big Modest Mouse fan. There's a few songs I really like that I've heard over the years, but not like a huge band in my life, but still pretty cool that they got them. Japanese Breakfast, they're more like your dream poppy. They got a couple like dancey songs too. I know that one that's been popping off lately, or at least that I heard like a few times over the last like few months has been stuck in my head. And it's very different from the rest of the stuff that they make, but I can't think of the name of it right now. But it's not a typical song for them, but it's nice, good crowd pleasing type song. And they got a good, they're like the Marias last year, honestly, like same type of vein, kind of same space that they occupy in my mind. Santa Gold too, still kicking it, another one that's been around for a really long time, and just kind of popping off, still just hanging around. Like I'm sure they got like a second life on TikTok or something too that spurned this on. But what's going on in the last row? Like I said, I talked about Cody and Cranberry earlier. They overlap, I believe. I just looked at the Louder lineup like 20 minutes ago, and so I should know this, but I believe they're also playing Louder. And another one that overlaps. They're like alt, like in a completely unique way too. I think like every like different like kind of alt scene / micro scene is kind of represented. It's very interesting to me. So another couple bands that people probably know a few songs by, but have really good stuff that I like to recommend. Jet. I know that Jet obviously Are You Gonna Be My Girl is the song everybody knows. It's like very ubiquitous pop culture, huge impact. But I think that they got a lot of good stuff on their like discography, especially on that first album. I will say this. It's all their first album. Like everything good is on their first album. But you got some really good stuff on there. They had another hit called Cold Heart Bitch. That's a really good song. That's more like everybody compares them to like there's like AC/DC ripoff, but that song I think reminds me a lot more like The Who, but it's got a really good chorus to it. And then you got like Look What You Done, which is a Sexy Sadie ripoff, but still really enjoy that song. Roll Over DJ, Get Me Out of Here is a really great song. There's a song, I can't think of the name of it right now, but they got some good songs. They're going to put together a really entertaining like 40-minute set. If they play for an hour, that's a mistake. But you got bangers. You can bang out like 6, 7, 8 songs in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and they're going to be really solid. OK Go is another one. Everybody probably knows the Treadmill song. Here It Goes Again, I think it's called. It was a Rock Band one, I think also. But, mainly known for the Treadmill video. They got some really good stuff, especially off their first album. The song Get Over It, I really like. Second album's got like A Million Ways and Do What You Want. Those are really good bangers as well. So those are two bands that I recommend checking out if you're just like only familiar with the one song. So I think that's a solid addition to the lineup. And then American Hi-Fi. Now, I can't think of the song. There's a song from American Pie 2 that they got. I think it's called, Vertigo, I think it's called. That's a good song. And there's another song off their first album besides the big hit that I know too. But they're mainly known for Flavor of the Week. One of my favorite pop punk songs of all time, personally. So, a band that I would recommend checking out as well. Now, the rest of these I'm not familiar with. I'm not going to try and pronounce. I'm sure this is probably pronounced the way that it is a misspelling of. But you got the Tulips. You got Violet Grohl, daughter of Dave Grohl. Trying to go too fast, trying to finish up at this point, I guess. But I haven't heard her music. I know that she has a new album that's supposed to be coming out. I saw an interview where he was talking about how like he didn't know anything about her making music or didn't collaborate with her or anything like that until it was like already done. Cardinals, Big Special, Porch Light, Showing Teeth, Garbage Barbie, and again Songs for Kids you got on the second day as well. So, do I think this festival fills its role? Absolutely. This is a good lineup. This is a really good lineup relative to previous years prior to 2025. It's just hard to compare it to last year's. We'll talk about last year's again real quick. All right, so 2025, like I kind of showed earlier, first day a little bit shorter, opened a little bit later, but just this lineup, this first day lineup just knocks it out of the park. I'm not familiar a whole lot with the bottom line, but I've heard a lot of good things about Joey Valence and Bray. But just, first of all, Deftones is just great. They're an amazing live band. I'm trying to divorce my personal bias, right? Like, they're one of my favorite bands too, but like, they're a great live band. Especially at this time, I believe they were still touring behind, like, or it was prior to their set list change. So now they have a lot more of their new stuff in there, but, you know, not that I don't think their new stuff is good, but when they're representative of like their whole career, good, like every album has like 2 or 3 songs on the set list, right? Like, this was a good time to see them on top of how good they are live, right? You got Lenny Kravitz, doesn't play a whole lot of shows, and then Sublime, who just came back with Jacob Noel, son of Bradley. But also you got the Marias, Pixies, Idols, Spoon, Inhaler. I think Inhaler is one of my favorite like new bands, like post 2020 bands. Spoon has been around forever. There's a lot of really good stuff. Idols had a lot of momentum like last decade. That I think is kind of carried over a little bit, but they're on like obviously more punky side. Pixies are legends, and Marias were anyway one of the most underrated bands. Now I think they're actually getting a lot of love, but they all bring different vibes, right? Like, you got a good spectrum of representation as far as like different types of alternative and rock music that are here on this lineup as well. So for Friday, for a short day especially, I think this is a really, really strong opening. Then day 2, you have My Chemical Romance. This day, I think just start to finish was just really strong. Like, you had stuff playing like early in the day, and then Sunday as well too. Like, there's a couple bands that are. Oh no, never mind. I just found them. So you have My Chemical Romance, obviously headlining Black Parade. You know, big deal. KG Elephant, Black Keys, both really high profile, successful bands that have been around for over a decade now. I think the Black Keys are like going on 20 years, but they've been a big radio presence at least since like early 2010s. So you got Public Enemy, another group, not that they perform a lot, and they're on the more political side. So there's alternative hip hop as far as the hip hop representation goes. Backseat Lovers, band that I really liked off the momentum of their first album. TV on the Radio, again, like kind of legendary, been around, represent a unique scene that doesn't get a whole lot of representation on these type of festival bills. And then All America Rejects is your other pop punk kind of representation for the weekend, right? I don't need to go too far down the lineup, but this fourth line is also really strong. You got Johnny Marr, Beaches, Mannequin Pussy, and Bill Murray. Those are all pretty well followed, highly respected artists. And then last day, right, you got Blink-182 headlining, but you got Vampire Weekend and Alabama Shakes, 2 very opposite end of the spectrum types of alternative bands or indie bands. Like, you got Alabama Shakes, definitely more southern influenced, and then your Vampire Weekend is like your, like I like to call it prep kid music. Like, it's made by like rich preppy kids. Now, whether or not you like it, I understand either way. But they're one of my favorite bands because I just like their approach to music and how they kind of have made their songs over the years. Then you got Lucy Dacus, Devo, Wet Leg, 4 Non-Blondes, and Franz Ferdinand on this line. And then like there's some interesting stuff down here as well. You got like Stereophonics is another. They're a British band. They don't play a whole lot over here. Never really broke big, but they got like a good like hour set list, right, that you can play through. And then Weird Al, you know, topping it all off. So, and that's not even talking about some of the bands that I didn't discuss from further down that I think are really good as well. So just trying to compare last year's lineup to any of their other lineups is a fool's errand, in my opinion. I think, like I said, this lineup is one of my favorite festival lineups I've ever personally seen. Like, it's just got really good depth all throughout the lineup. There's good stuff on almost every single row. I don't know a whole lot of the Saturday and Sunday last two rows, but still, I think your headliners are really strong, but I think your support acts are really good as well, and that to me is a big factor in how I kind of view these festivals, right? It's impressive, a Lollapalooza, you get huge headliners, but then there's not really a whole lot of depth throughout the day. You can't go at 2 o'clock and get really good sets throughout the day, right? So I like that about this festival, but if we're talking about previous years, right? Because this is the first year they moved locations. They moved to a different part of Atlanta. This is the year before, right? 2024. Now, Noah Khan headlining was a bit divisive, obviously. He's a newer artist. Doesn't necessarily fit the profile that you might necessarily associate with the type of person who would go to this festival or the type of audience that would previously go in past years. But I think ultimately ended up working out. Made a lot of sense. Went over pretty well. But after Arcade Fire, Young the Giant, you got Interpol here, you got the Revivalists, you got Metric, all pretty good, but then it drops off pretty hard going into these lower bands. Pond is Kevin Parker's band before Tame Impala. Other than that, I don't recognize a lot of these bands. I know one song by Late Night Drive Home. Switchfoot, I missed. They were a couple hit wonder back in the 2000s that were big in the Christian rock kind of scene. You got Weezer and Queens of the Stone Age, so you can't even necessarily, you're in your mind, one of them is not good enough to advertise as a headliner, right? So that's already kind of a more sticky situation. And then you got Offspring, Girl in Red. It's already falling off by the second line. Third line, I think, is really solid. You got Mike Snow and Royal Blood. More known for a few songs, but got a pretty rich discography. I think they can draw a lot of good stuff for a set from. And then Sunny Day Real Estate, obviously, emo legends. But again, not a whole lot of bands that you look further down the lineup that are as high profile, right? And then Sunday, you got Foo Fighters, Billy Idol, Portugal the Man, Men I Trust, Dinosaur Jr., Waxahachie, Matt and Kim, and the Struts. And then after that, I don't know a single. I know Nova Twins because they've opened for a couple bands I've seen, but just again, if you compare this lineup in 2024 to where we're at now, leaps and bounds ahead. But 25 set the bar for the lineup so high that I think it wasn't going to live up to it, right? I'm going to look back at a couple of previous years as well. This is 2023. You got the Killers, Greta Van Fleet, Yeah Yeah Yeahs on Friday. Cypress Hill, Manchester Orchestra, Group Love, and Placebo. I think this is a little bit of a step up personally. This lineup was a little bit better in 2024's, if I'm just looking at it. But again, the difference in how these bands at the top are represented, right? That's too far of a zoom. But these first three lines are pretty big, and then it gets small pretty soon, right? And that's because a lot of these are not recognizable names in the same way that you could fill 4 or 5 lines on these newer ones. Same Saturday, you got Muse, Tenacious D, Mars Volta, which I'm not crazy about. I'm not crazy about either of those as a direct support to your headliner. I think if these guys were on line 3, I'd probably feel a little bit different. But line 3's Gaslight Anthem, Phantogram, front bottoms. I'm not a big front bottoms person, but I think that they're pretty as far as profile and appeal, this is a pretty solid line, right? But your second line's a little bit weaker. Sunday, you got Lumineers, Hozier, and then Flaming Lips. I think they're playing Yoshimi. Yeah, they're playing Yoshimi as the album play. Then you have Father John Misty, Future Islands, Live, and The Walkmen. I've never heard of The Walkmen, but, again, this is more kind of in line with what their 2024 lineup looked like, right? Versus 2025. Now, 2022, you have Green Day, Nine Inch Nails as 2 of your headliners, and then your third headliner is My Morning Jacket. Now, I know they have a big following. They were a big, kind of jam band adjacent, kind of back in the day, had a very fierce, loyal fan base. But again, if that's a festival headliner, I'm going to view it a little bit differently. Then your direct support, your line 2s are Billy Idol, Rainbow Kitten, Surprise. Already see there's a clear we're going in the wrong order, but there's a clear progression that leads into 2025 and now 2026, right? Where it's slowly getting better. You do have some good you have good artists on here. Churches, King Gizzard. I don't remember how to pronounce this one, but Death Cab for Cutie, and then shout out Biffy Clyro, one of my favorite bands. But not a big deal over here, obviously, in the United States. And then Mount Joy and Japanese Breakfast again, too. But I didn't even see D-Joe's on here. I didn't know D-Joe's been around that long. But, again, we'll do one more. This is just going to be the last one because this is 2021. I don't want to go back into last decade because this festival's been around for a decade. But you got Foo Fighters and the Strokes, but your third headliner is Run the Jewels. Now, I get Run the Jewels is a very well-respected, highly thought-of artist, hip-hop duo from that era, right? But you're talking about an alternative festival. That doesn't, you don't want that to be a headliner. If that's a direct support, I can maybe talk myself into that. But your direct support, St. Vincent, Mac DeMarco. Mac DeMarco now, pretty high profile. Like, actually, probably at the time, it was pretty high profile, highly respected too. But St. Vincent's not somebody I would want there. Alice Cooper, Portugal the Man again. Maybe Alice Cooper, but not necessarily you're going to get excited about. And then Modest Mouse, Phoebe Bridgers again. Those is your direct supports. They're solid. If you like the headliners enough, they're not like deterrents or anything like that. But, I think that this 2026 lineup compared to 21 to 24 is still a clear step up and a good, solid all-around lineup. But, again, I'm coming off of a really, really, really strong lineup in 2025 that I think was, again, in contention for like one of the best festival lineups that I can remember as far as just headline talent, but also like just throughout the day, you got really, really strong stuff. So, I think like overall, I say it's like a B plus, A minus, but you're coming off an A plus plus. It's hard to like really like maintain that momentum. So we're gonna do another video in a couple days, kind of talking about like fan reactions and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you're gonna go. I might you might see me. But anyway, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoy. See you next time.